Next, I want to paint in a bridge in between the added tower on the left and the distant one in the middle. So I'm just going to sample some colors from the one of the underbellies of one of these cantilevers, and try and paint in a little kind of suspension bridge. And I'm just kind of eyeballing the perspective right now and see if we can get something to match. We want to keep it quite hard edged. Usually elements like these you don't really want to paint with a airbrush. Now I'm going to put a curve adjustment layer on top of it and make it darker with the intention that I'll be able to come back and unmatte part of it and it'll look like it's illuminated. So if I go in and choose a nice brush, in this case a soft brush, and brush the darkness away at each end of the bridge, it'll kind of look like there's a little bit of light coming from those towers and hitting the underside of the bridge. Now the bridge is looking a little odd in perspective, near the middle especially, so I'm just going to try and erase some of that. Again, I just want to make sure I'm using the sharp brush when it comes to edge work. I don't want my edges on architectural elements to be painted too soft. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lace the bridge with a few little lights. Just try and get that bridge to pop out a little bit. As we go back in space, we'll try and get the lights to become a little bit smaller. It's not quite accurate yet, but it's a start. You can always go back and fatten some of them up if they're too small. And I created them down on the floor of the bridge, just so that just because it's pretty small at this distance. So I duplicated the rail lights and made a copy just so that we have, it looks like we have two different handrails on each side of the bridge. And I'm just going to brighten a few of them up just to make them look different. We don't want them to look like absolute copies of each other. And since they're probably some type of light, or maybe even candles, on some type of rope structure, maybe each one of them is facing slightly a different way, kind of like Christmas lights or garden lights. So I'm going to throw a curve on the bridge and just brighten it up a lot. What I typically like to do is brighten it up a lot, and then I'll invert that matte so it has no effect, and then I'll go in with a soft brush and choose the areas that I want the effect to take place. So ultimately I'm just brightening up the ends a little bit more. Only going to be viewed at about 50%. So just like when you're working for a DVD lecture, really we're only going to be able to view it at about 1,000 pixels wide, perhaps even smaller. So I'm working at about 2K. It's 1920 pixels wide, and so if it were reduced down to 50%, then of course the ultimate goal would be only 1,000 pixels wide. So all these little brush strokes I'm adding are really going to be reduced and hopefully look photorealistic as they normally do when you reduce them that much. So I'm going to turn my attention now to these little ropes on the top of these spires on the rooftop here. So I think if I go in and just give it a shot and try and freehand paint these, I can probably get a similar look. Just sampled the color straight out of the initial rope from the plate, and keep in mind that they are slightly farther apart, farther away. So if we fatten them up just a tad, just basically duplicated the layer and offset it a tiny bit, gave us a little more width in the ropes. And then also what I was able to do is take one of the layers that was offset and just darken it a bit, so it looks like a rope that has a light side and a dark side. So I added a curve to it, and I'm going to darken it down, and now I'm going to be able to matte the inverse, so wherever I paint it will not be darkened and it'll appear to be illuminated by some of those lights that are on the rooftop illuminating that entire area. So if I crank that curve up, it'll be a little more obvious what I'm talking about. Now let's just put a little bit of a blur on the cable, just a tiny bit, so that it doesn't appear sharp like a Photoshop painting. And then maybe what we need to do is brighten it up a little bit. The darker parts especially look a little too dark. Okay, so that's not too bad. A little softer, I think, and it'll more... if you take a lot of cues from that, then you're really setting yourself up for more likely success in creating the extensions for that plate. Now since I made a duplicate of that bridge, I'm going to have to go in there and try and change the bridge around a bit, just as I did with the duplicate buildings, just so it doesn't look like a copy. As well, I'm just going to try and make sure that we matte each of the ends of the bridge so it looks like it's properly hidden behind some of that architecture there. I think we need to fix up some of these lights. Maybe just get rid of a few of them. Notice when we're zoomed out, it starts to become quite convincing, quite realistic. That's really what it'll look like in the ultimate comp. Let's get into the ends of the bridge here. Try and hide some of the ends behind the tower. I'll help it look a little more convincing. And then maybe what we need to do is go in and soften the bridges both a little bit. I'm going to darken this bridge. Seems a little bit on the bright side, so if we bring it down, that'll help. And now I'm just going to go into the end and we'll give it just a little punch of light so that it looks like the room with the window beneath the bridge has its light on and it's illuminated. We'll just soften that a little bit. If you add little tweaks like that on their own layer, then you can go back in there and fade them out. And as I did there, just kind of sweep a few brush strokes through them, and so that the bridge looks like it's made out of planks. Okay, so let's turn our attention to the base of this tower. It looks like it's slightly cut off, so I'm going to go in and try and make it look a little more realistic, a little more grounded. And we're almost at a point where we're going to prep this set extension to go off to the composite. So again, I'm going to paint this edge with a sharper brush. You can see immediately that the difference between that soft brush I was using and the hard brush looks a lot more realistic. So I'm just going to isolate the set extension layers, turn off the plate, and prep this to go over to the composite. I need to give it its alpha channel and flatten it against black. I like to use TIFFs, and I'll just save this out to my directory where I keep all my images for composite. So the next step is to save out a reference layer, and this is how far I had to slide the plate over. Over, as well as I'm going to save out the matte. Need the water mats so that I can control the color of that one tower that used to cast the blue reflection in the water. So the final step is to figure out how many pixels I move the plate to the left for that water reflection. So if I marquee it and line up the marquee, I'll do a copy and Control N for new, and we'll get 526 pixels, and that'll be our offset in the comp.